Hi, this is Tyler from Haste Repair Group, and today I'll be putting together a Chia farming build with all these parts to my left here. And this is based on the Build the Budget Chia cryptocurrency plotting rig, ChiaDecentral.com blog post, which I can link in the description below. One disclaimer is that I know next to nothing about Chia farming. I'm going to be building this for a friend, and it'll be kind of a grand experiment for me to learn about Chia. I might build one for myself as well, but this is the preliminary steps in learning, at least for me. So if you're looking for a build, especially based on the recommendations in the blog post, this is it. And I'm going to show you how to put it together, and I won't be able to report on anything to do with Chia or Chia farming in this video, but maybe I'll do a follow-up just to see and show and tell how it's going later on after we've tried it out. So I'm going to go over the parts. Alright, so here's a stack of parts that we have for the build. I'm going to go through them one by one, and then I'll videotape me installing everything into the case. So first off, we have a SanDisk X110 128GB solid state drive. That's going to be our boot drive. And we have a ASUS Prime B460 Plus motherboard. A link to websites and maybe Amazon.ca post for more information that I won't go into here because it's not really a motherboard review video, just to build the Chia farming rig. This box here, this NHU12S, that is a heatsink and fan combination. On top of that box we have a heatsink for the NVMe SSD right behind it, the Samsung 970 EVO Plus NVMe M.2 2TB solid state drive. And right beside that we have some Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 3200 MHz 2x 16GB RAMs equaling 32 GB. I hope they said that correctly. Okay, we have a 10th gen Intel Core i7-10700 CPU, and below that in the cardboard box we have a Seagate Barracuda 4TB hard drive. I should state that I'm probably going to install more hard drives, but again, this is in the preliminary stages of trying out Chia farming. And to help power it all, we have the EVGA 500 watt gold power supply. Oh, and I should note, the case behind is a Corsair Carbide Series 100R Silent Edition computer tower case. And there's a couple of case fans installed in this already. However, I might install one more before this build is done. Yeah, so let's get started. What I think I will do now, I'll timestamp everything in the video here so you can skip through and find what you need. But I'm going to do an unboxing for each item, and then we'll lay it all out and put it together. Alright, so first off, let's check out the tower case. Fairly standard case. We have room for maybe 2 hard drives up here. We're probably going to bypass an optical drive, but maybe install one at some point if we have enough SATA power connections. But at the moment we're not too worried about it. We have a air intake fan right here to our right, and which will come in handy. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 hard drive bays. Well, I guess the whole thing's a hard drive bay, but 4 slots to fit hard drives. And of course there's the area for the motherboard itself, some cables probably for the front USB panel, and the headphone microphone jack. And we have a rear exhaust fan right here. Something in this little box here as well. We have some screws, and it looks like some more screws and some tie straps for cable management. Overall, I'm kind of a big fan of how this case looks. It's really sleek, it's black, it's not too flashy. We're not trying to build like a big like LED light powered gaming rig here. We just want something simple and something with some hopefully good airflow and heat management, which I don't really know. Maybe it will be great for that, maybe it won't, but as I say, it's all part of the grand experiment. So let's check out the next box. And here we have our rather high-powered 10th Gen Core i7-10700 CPU. Not overclocked, 2.9 megahertz, 8 core, 16 threads. Definitely a nice CPU. Let's take a look at what we got in the box. The box is a little bit beat up, but that's okay as long as the contents are fine. Here we have the CPU. Let's try to get that in focus. Alright, no surprises there, no particular bells and whistles. I suppose I should note that the socket type is LGA 1200. And we got the stock Intel CPU Heatsink Fan. Since I bought something a little bit different and quite a bit bigger. Oh, we're totally out of focus, sorry. Yeah, we have an entirely different heatsink and CPU fan combo to unbox here as well, so I'm going to put this one aside and use it for a different build. Alright, and speaking of that heatsink and CPU fan combo, may as well pull that box up right now. Put this stuff off to the side. Oh, here's our SanDisk X110 solid state drive again. I should note that this is a refurbished drive, quote unquote. It is a used solid state drive. I buy them in bulk to add them to refurbished computer towers and laptops. In the case of this Chia build, I think it's going to be just fine. We just needed to boot the OS. So, let's take a look at this. Now, I do know that this particular brand is called Noctua, I guess, NHU12S. I don't really know much about this brand at all. The fan itself does have a very nice color to it, which sits in contrast to our black case, but I mean, the fan itself is quite nice to look at. It's quite pleasing. If I were more of a interior designer type, I would really like the aesthetic value of this fan more than I do now, I guess. Just gotta pull this thing out. So that is an impressive looking combination. Again, very aesthetically pleasing, very shiny, interesting colors. So it'll be kind of exciting to install this. And it also came with some accessories and a mounting system, which is actually pretty nice. We have a little baggie here, which looks like they included some thermal paste. That's excellent. And let's take a look here. You know, this is not a perfect unboxing, and also not a perfect explanation of all the parts and accessories. You know, I'm going to get something wrong here. It's just labeled common parts. Let's stick with that. Okay, we have some kind of adhesive strip. We have a kind of fancy looking Noctua, it's either a pin or a sticker to put on top of the tower case. Oh, it's definitely a sticker for the tower case we'll put on later. And little cable extension. As I stated before, the Noctua thermal paste. And some extra metal clamps. Alright, we have some rubber bumpers, something like that. Or okay. Maybe they look like replacements for these rubber bumpers on the side, on the corners of the fan. Something like that. Let's see. Little notes in different languages. Oh, a little manual. And we have something that looks like the bushings of some sort. Again, I'm probably going to get that wrong, but we have that. I should really look up the parts list before talking about it, so you actually have an idea of what I'm talking about in case you don't know already. So anyway, we have the entire assembly here. It's quite nice and fancy looking. It's kind of difficult to see if everything's out of focus. I apologize for that while I blather on. So there's our massive accessories and mounting system for the fan and heatsink. Anyway, we'll get a look at this later on when we put it in the tower case onto the motherboard. Alright, so next up we have the Samsung 970 EVO Plus nvme M.2 SSD, 2 terabytes. And let's get a quick look at this. Just a tiny little solid state drive. There we have it. And next up we have the heatsink for the SSD. Let's take a look at this. Now, I've never installed something like this before, but it looks fairly interesting. It almost looks like a little pocket knife. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how this fits on the SSD later on. And it's an interesting design. It has its own little, fairly substantial little heatsink right there. Interesting unit. Pretty sharp looking. Okay, let's take a look at the Seagate Barracuda 4 terabyte hard drive. Your standard SATA powered hard drive, 4 terabytes in capacity. Looks pretty nice. Okay, now we have our Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 RAM, 2 times 16 gigabyte sticks. Yeah, looks like your standard RAM with its own little tiny heat sinks installed. So I'm guessing this is going to be a nice little addition to the system, which I project and judge will be a pretty fast operation. Okay, next up we have the motherboard, the ASUS Prime B460 Plus. Now there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this motherboard. It's actually pretty cool as far as what it offers, and I'm not going to go on about it too much here. Again, I'll link to the website in the description below. We'll just get a quick look at it. We have our SATA cables that came with. Alright, let's pull this thing out. A fairly standard motherboard look for ASUS. We have various things going on here with PCI Express slots. PCI slots are a spot for the NVMe SSD, 4 RAM slots, 2 extra SATA ports there, 4 SATA ports here. The I/O panel, which we'll be using because there is no graphics card necessary for this build, has a VGA, DVI, HDMI, PS2 port for older style mouse and keyboards, USB 2.0 it looks like, 4 USB 3.0, and 1 Ethernet port, as well as the stereo and audio lines in. Cool. Again, I don't think I'll spend too much more time going over this. Go check out the website. It's way more detailed and way more specific than I'll ever be. but it is a pretty looking thing. Goes with the color of the case. Alright, last but not least is our power supply. Now, I don't think there's anything particularly special about this one, but I do appreciate a good power supply, a nice looking power supply, and also one with a multitude of different connections to modify and play around with. We have a power cable here included, that's nice, fairly standard, and we have our screws taped to the inside of the box for mounting. Alright, let's get this bubble wrap off. In this case we have the cables coming out of the unit itself. Again, we don't really need anything specific or fancy here, we just need to power the machine. We have ample amount of power connections that should power either fans, system board, hard drives, etc. I think we have just enough. EVGA 500 GD power supply. Nice color, goes with the black tower. Alright, so let's get started with the build. So I have this on super bright settings to actually be able to see inside the tower case. It is so dark. So it looks like we have some cables to take apart and set aside, so we'll just spend a moment doing that. A lot of this video will be time-lapse. Okay, so first things first, let's get our I/O board installed. Not exactly a fantastic fit, but I assume it'll stay in there quite nice once the motherboard's installed. Didn't feel like the satisfying snap in with this one, but it's sitting somewhat firm, so close enough. Okay, let's get to the installation of the motherboard. Okay, so that was this one screw above the DIMM slots was a little bit difficult to get to with my big fat European fingers. That's okay though, we're good. The motherboard's in there secure, the I/O board is in there pretty snug, the I/O shield I should say. Yeah, we're good to move on to the next step. I think we'll install the... Maybe we'll get the power supply just sitting down there for the time being. That's a really nice, snug fit. I like how that feels. And also, I should note how nice the aesthetics look so far with the black motherboard with the white stripes, the black CPU, and the dark black case. Looking kind of slick. Okay, let's get those screws in the back. Alright, power supply installed. Alright, so we have a little black cover here on top of the CPU socket. It says, "In search of incredible." I had to do a double take because it also says, important, install processor first, then remove and keep the cover And I was thinking, well, how do I do that? But anyways, we remove the latch. You can see that the whole thing lifts up like a lid. Okay. And we'll remove that plastic bit in a moment. Pull our CPU out. As always, we like to look for the little arrow on the CPU to understand exactly where it's going to fit on the motherboard. And in this case, I noticed that there's a little arrow right here on top of the black cover. So that would indicate that CPU sits like this, which does make sense, because it makes it easy to read the details printed onto the CPU itself. Okay, perfect, wonderful fit. Now let's see about getting this top piece taken off. Alright, let's latch this down. Nice fit. Okay, so we'll apply some thermal paste and the heatsink and fan combo a little bit later on. Alright, let's get to installing the RAM. I don't know if I'll end up taking it out later to make it easier to install something else, but let's just do it now and see what happens. One thing I did want to point out is that this is a feature I really like on motherboards when it's present. Right here we have DIMM. I have to focus my eyes. We have DIMM A2, A1, B2, and B1 slots. So on the motherboard here we have an asterisk beside the RAM slots where best optimized for a dual channel. So I just like that. If you don't have a manual, or if you have trouble finding documentation online, especially sometime in the late distant future, those little asterisks on the motherboard gives you an idea of where you should first install the RAM, especially if you're just dealing with two and looking for that dual channel speed. Okay, let's go ahead and install. Those black heat sinks on the RAM further improving the aesthetic value thus far. Okay, let's move on to maybe we'll try installing the SSD. Let's do that next. We have this little tiny screw and this little small piece here to screw into the motherboard to ensure that the SSD fits correctly. And now these pieces came with the motherboard itself, which I suppose is standard. I haven't received a SSD that came with these screws in particular before, but I do know it's fairly common to find packaged with the motherboard. If you don't have any, just looks like this. Oh, that's a terrible story. In case you have to sort one, that's what it looks like with the screw installed. It's kind of similar to the bits found on the female ends found on graphics cards, though a little bit smaller. So anyway, there we go. It's a nice little fit. SSD is installed. Maybe next we'll either work on connecting power plugs and such to the motherboard, or maybe we'll look at installing the heatsink. I think we should do the plugs first, actually. Okay, so I'm going to take a moment to remove the back panel and begin feeding some of the cables through these little conduits here. Let's see if we can make this somewhat tidy. I'm not the greatest at cable management, I do admit, but I'll give it my best effort. Alright, it's a bit of a process to install the reset switch and power LED plugins. It all goes down here. You'll find it on the motherboard, or you can consult the manual. I'm going to spend a moment to fumble around with this off video, because it'll just take me a few extra minutes. Alright, so I have the power switch and LED cables installed, and the reset switch with time lapse. Oh, and I already installed the rear exhaust fan to the motherboard. Cable goes right here, and we're going to now plug in the front case fan. Here we go. Okay, so now we'll spend some time playing around with the power supply cables and get it all lined up for powering the hard drives and stuff like that. Okay, so before I go on here, I just want to point out that I was looking at this case earlier and thinking, wow, there's a lot of cables around here. Interesting connections. So what I found out in the documentation, I haven't quite encountered this for a while, but we have a SATA power connection to power the fans, I'm guessing, because we have three male end connections to plug the female end in. So I'm going to try that instead of plugging into the motherboard. I'm guessing that's just another option for including more case fans, or just providing a different option to route power to the fans, and perhaps that will have a different effect somehow. I'm not really too sure, but anyway, we'll try it out, and it's going to be a messy cable situation to begin with, but we'll figure it out. Okay, we'll start by routing the power supply cables through this little hole. Next, we'll route all the cables for the case fans through the hole right here. Okay, so now it looks somewhat clean, a bit of a mess so far. I'm going to flip this around and we'll work on all this cable management. Okay, so this is a bit of an aside, but before we deal with all these messy spaghetti cables, I'm going to flip this around, carefully lay this down, and what I actually forgot to do was install the heatsink on the SSD. We're going to do that, and I'll also plug in two of the SATA cables to power to connect the hard drive and SSD to the motherboard. But first, let's get that Thermalright heatsink on this SSD. Let's try to figure out how it fits. Time lapse. Alright, so what I'd like to do is figure out how to install this heatsink onto the SSD. So I already pulled this little plastic blue piece off, which I'm guessing is maybe a sticker for these pads. Instead, I'm going to take 4 screws off, and we'll see what's under this metal plate. So it looks like these are perhaps little thermal pads. That's the only thing I can imagine them being, or why they're there. So I'll stick that here and do the same over here. Peel that plastic off. And okay, now I would imagine the motherboard connection goes over here. Yeah, so we'll stick this in the tray and stick this on top. Looks like we can maybe get this over to the side a bit more so the screws are exposed. What I'll do is just line up the connection right here, stick this top back on, and we'll give it a trial run on the motherboard over here. Okay. Alright, I guess that's how that works. Easy enough. Alright, let's get these screws back on. Okay, over to the motherboard. Okay, well, I guess that looks pretty cool. And I'm very interested to learn about how effective it is, especially over time. Maybe I'll get my friend to run some diagnostics from time to time or keep an eye on the temperatures. But either way, it kind of looks like some kind of cool aerodynamic thing. Yeah. Well, let's move on back to the cables. Alright, so before I move on, I'm going to take a moment to install the solid state drive and 4TB hard drive into the top two slots. Start with the SSD. So unfortunately, I don't have a caddy that'll fit into this in order for the SSD to sit snug and look professional and whatnot. What I'm going to do is just use a zip tie and secure it onto this plastic caddy. Alright, so again, not the most professional look, but seeing as that you will not be able to actually view inside the case when it's all put together, I'm not going to worry about it too much, and I don't believe my friend will care too much. And if he does, well, I don't know. So let's go with and install the hard drive. Alright, wonderful. Now let's get to dealing with those cables. Here we'll get these SATA cables installed. I think I'll put them on 1 and 2, the ports right here. So it'll take just a little while for me to figure out what to do with all these cables. I will film myself, but I'll just time-lapse the entire thing and perhaps do a follow-up later on. Alright, so now on to the heatsink and fan installation. So the first thing I need to do is install the back mounting plate. Luckily, as we know, there's a giant hole in the back side of the case so I don't have to remove the motherboard. I just simply have to insert right here. Line up the 4 holes and we're good. Okay. And now back to the front of the motherboard. I'll stick the 4, oh, it's a little hard to see. One moment. So we have the mounting plate, and we have these 4 little black spacers that we need to install on the screws, or on the bolts rather. Okay. And I'm going to lay this down, the case down in a moment here. I just want to get this mounting plate on and secure. I have the brackets orientated to have the fan sitting this way, and my rationale is that I'm going to have air flowing this way and hopefully hot air just taken right out by the rear exhaust. So that's my plans thus far. If you have any, if you disagree at all, or if you have any other techniques that I'm not necessarily aware about, please feel free to leave a comment and let me know. I'm open to feedback. Alright. But anyway, let's get to applying some thermal paste and attaching this fan and heatsink. And now the heatsink. Alright, and now we'll attach the fan. It's always a hot tip to install the fan in the right direction. A lot of the time, such is the case with this fan, in case you're unsure, often there will be an arrow on the fan itself indicating which direction the airflow is. In this case, it's quite obvious. Not only do we have the brackets to attach to the heatsink itself, but we also have the arrow indicating which direction the airflow is. So let's get this fan on. So we have the heatsink and fan installed. Kind of an interesting design, the way these little latches fasten onto the grills of the heatsink. Feels pretty secure though, I guess. Yeah, so I think I'll turn this case around and focus on some cable management in the back, do a little time lapse. And then we'll get about to, actually, now that I say it, instead of that, I'm going to probably spend some time, we'll try booting it up and make sure everything works okay, access BIOS, and then we'll probably get to installing Windows maybe before we wrap everything up. Okay. Alright, so everything's all powered up. We'll give this a quick boot test, and we'll move the camera around to see the fan spinning, and then we'll go ahead and install Windows. Okay, we'll power on. So far so good. As you can see, all of the fans are operating just fine. Just hitting delete to enter BIOS setup here. Sorry for the shaky camera. Just wanted to demonstrate that everything is a go, and here we are in our ASUS motherboard BIOS. So I'm going to play around in this a little bit, make sure everything's ready to go, and then I'll go ahead and install Windows and we'll go from there. Okay, so just a quick check-in. I got Windows 10 installed and just running some updates. come back and maybe show off the quick boot. I'll set up the hard drive and nvme as storage devices for later access in the Chia program, and then we'll come back and do a recap before the video is done. So we have Windows up and running. We have the NVMe SSD set up as storage. We have the 4 terabyte Seagate Barracuda set up as storage. I'm just going to deal with this big tangle of cables here. I'll time-lapse that, and then we'll do a boot test and do a recap of everything. Here we go. So, that is my cable management right now. I'm not going to worry. It does look a little bit messy if you do take a good hard look into the case, but being that everything is kind of neatly tied up, kind of grouped together, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And anyway, the insides are not exposed at all anyway, so let's put this lid on and we'll boot on up and we'll see how this thing's performing. So let's give this thing the old boot test. There you have it. Super fast boot. Super impressed. Oh, I forgot to plug in the Ethernet cable. Okay, so next up I'm going to run a benchmark test. Okay, so I ran a quick user benchmark test, and as I expected, gaming's quite low and workstation's quite low, just because I believe those rely heavily on GPU performance combined with the rest of the hardware. As we can see here, the desktop rating is in the 90th percentile at 93%, ranked as a nuclear submarine. Anyway, just some basic info. Performance-wise, this is a very good machine. With a strong GPU, it would be awesome. It'd be great, but you know, it's not really what we need for, as far as I know, for Chia farming. So, anyway, I'm gonna move on to wrapping things up. So there we go. The Chia farming build is complete. I'm kind of conflicted. On the one hand, I had a pretty good time putting this together. It was really interesting, and I think it performs really well as a desktop, and I'm happy with it. However, I have no idea how to farm Chia. I have no idea how well this will perform farming Chia. I have to assume that it will be good based on the budget build and the blog post that we based this build off of. Time will tell. And either way, if you're looking at putting together a budget build for Chia farming and you have roughly $1,700 Canadian to spend, this is how you do it. So I hope that helped you out, and I hope you learned something, and thanks a lot for watching. If you have any feedback, or if you have any advice to share, or your own Chia farming experience, that'd be really great to hear about. Leave a comment and I'll reply to it, and we can start a conversation. Alright, thanks a lot.